This B2B giant is doing 2.5 times the revenue Zerodha, 2 times the revenue Zomato, and 5 times the revenue Lenskart. But I bet you've never even heard of them. This is the story of OfBusiness and how they built a 41,000 crore empire with a PAT of more than 400 crores. And today, I'll tell you the 4 insights they have used to crack the dhanda in the unsexy B2B industry. It all started in 2015 when Ashish Mohapatra quit his high-paying VC job at Matrix to start OfBusiness. Ashish was a high performer. He had seen all the peaks of his professional career, and I literally mean this. Even if you see his career trajectory, you would see that he has almost done everything. He is an IITian, he did his MBA from ISB, became a consultant in McKinsey, and eventually a VC at Matrix. Through all these years, he had analyzed tons of companies and pitches, and one thing seemed crystal clear to him, that Indian economy was booming. And the sector that fascinated him the most was MSME B2B sector. See, MSMEs are micro, small and medium enterprises that have a revenue of less than 250 crores. But this industry is so massive that it contributes almost 30% to India's GDP and provides employment to more than 1/3 of India. And this is exactly where Ashish saw a couple of problems. And being the bullish VC that he is, he assembled a team of 4 other co-founders to crack this complicated market. And by the way, we even spoke to the man himself, Ashish, who helped us understand the hidden nuances of this industry in a better way. So let's get into it with our very first insight, which is understanding customer patterns and value chain inside out. See, the MSME industry is very complicated. And to create a business here and earn margins, you need to understand the value chain pretty deeply. And out of all the categories they could have dealt in, be it raw materials, semi-finished goods and finished goods, the category that excited Ashish the most was raw materials. By the way, raw materials have lower margins compared to other categories that I told you about, but what makes this extremely lucrative is the higher frequency of capital turns, which makes this a sustainable business.
If you take Colgate will have North Bangalore as one distributor, and there will be no other distributor who can in turn sell Colgate's products there. This is for a distributor buying from Colgate. So there is a demarcation of a product and a geography cross-section. On the raw material side, that's not the case. Raw material side is humongous markets. The number of distributors are also far lesser. The margins are much more wafer thinner. Typically, the ability to actually put out that amount of capital is not very high in the distributor. And hence, it's literally dog eat dog. Nobody really has a clear demarcation of this is the area that they can get into. And hence, it was relatively easier for us on the raw material choice.
Great. So now before understanding what OfBusiness actually does, let's understand the value chain and let's take a very simple example. Let's say steel sheets, a popular raw material which is used everywhere. So be it your washing machines, fridge or cars. Now this value chain starts with a giant manufacturer on one end. Let's say JSW, who makes steel sheets at a humongous scale of lakhs of tons in their plants in, let's say, Karnataka. And on the other end, you have an SME based out of Delhi, which could be a fridge manufacturer. Now, JSW never supplies raw material directly to this SME. So between these two parties, there are multiple layers of supply chain. This layer starts with a giant distributor who is in the same city as a manufacturer, which in our example is Karnataka. Because large manufacturers do not really deal with all the orders by themselves, so they need a distributor who would take care of it for them. Next in the chain, you have a small trader who is in the same city as the SME, which in our example is Delhi. Now, if this SME in Delhi needs, let's say, 15 tons of steel, it cannot buy directly from JSW. JSW distributor in Karnataka would sell thousands of tons to a trader who would eventually supply 15 tons to this SME in Delhi. This is a very simplified way of how the entire supply chain works. Also, there could be a sub-distributor and a retailer in the chain depending on the raw material you are dealing in and the quantity that SME is probably buying. So let's say that SME only wants to buy 5 tons. Then they have to buy it from a retailer and they cannot buy this very small quantity from the trader. So in a nutshell, the bigger the chain, the more expensive becomes the raw material. And now this entire ecosystem is very interesting because the industry runs on only one thing, which is credit cycles. The old school dhanda way of buy now, pay later. No one pays cash upfront. But before we get into that, as you know, we've been talking a lot about depth when it comes to solving big business problems. So let me introduce you to something that will not only help you solve your toughest problems at work, but also help you change your career orbits. Introducing Craft by GrowthX. See, the most important lever to go from early to mid-senior to leadership in your careers is by creating business impact at work. But how do you create exponential impact while being consumed with your day-to-day? That's where Craft comes in. Craft helps professionals drive a significant business impact that is driven along with your daily work. To give you an example, a GrowthX member Rajneesh, who heads demand for Kika HR, built a 10 crore event pipeline after applying the frameworks taught in Craft of event-led growth. Today, you can access 4 crafts, each focusing on specific business problems. The link to check them out is in the description. Super! Getting back to the point of credit cycles. See, if you're an SME who has just purchased raw materials over 10 crores, you will not pay 10 crores to the trader today. You get a credit line of 30 days to pay it back. And it makes sense, right? Because raw materials are not cheap. And you're buying raw material which needs to be converted into a product and then eventually sold to a market. And during this entire process, you will also need to run day-to-day operations, pay salaries, take care of other expenses. So you cannot pay for raw materials upfront. Even the biggest companies, let's say ITC, Dabur, even they operate on a credit cycle. Cool. Now in this entire ecosystem, Ashish found out a couple of problems that both suppliers and MSMEs had. Both of them had 3 major problems. Let's talk about suppliers first. For suppliers, the first thing was that they wanted timely payments. Which makes sense, right? Because they have zero guarantee that the SME will actually pay the money on time, because all these relationships that they have with SMEs are based on trust and just word. So there's a chance that SME might delay the payment and the supplier might have to follow up. OfBusiness solved this by paying these suppliers upfront in a certain promised time period. But what they've done really well here is that they never falter on their promised timeline because of the solid documentations in line. The second pain point of the suppliers was that they wanted visibility on who actually was buying their product. Because if you're a distributor and you supply raw materials to multiple traders in the market, you have zero idea on which SME is actually buying your product, which means zero visibility on your end customer. But OfBusiness solved this because they are like the Amazon that connects suppliers with SMEs and removes distributors and traders in between, giving complete detail and visibility of end customers. The third problem is limited access to a certain level of traders and SMEs. What this essentially means is that if a trader or SME is not doing well, the supplier will also not do well, as there is always a chance of irregular quantities ordered by these folks. But OfBusiness solved this for them as the company gives access to so many SMEs across country, and it becomes very easier for suppliers to reach out to these SMEs. So now they have a wide audience to cater to. On the other hand, SMEs also had 3 problems. The first is tracking the shipments and real-time delivery, because traders don't give you a mobile app for you to track your raw materials. You have to call them up and you have to ask them why there's a delay. But OfBusiness again solve a big problem because they act as a platform in the middle. They make tracking easy, just like packages on Amazon. In fact, the on-time in full average for industry, which is a metric to measure the performance quality of on-time deliveries, is 60%, while OfBusiness has an average of 70 to 75%. The second problem for SMEs was the quality of raw material. It's extremely difficult for an SME to be sure of the quality of raw material on every delivery, because it could get damaged during the transit or it might be of cheap quality to begin with.
Quality testing report arrives before the shipment. Whereas in the case of if we not being there and they buying from the traditional ecosystem, typically the quality testing report comes in months after the shipment.
Not just that, they also save SMEs from delays, thefts and quality check problems that happen all the time in India by also providing an additional service of transportation to doorstep. By the way, in case of imported raw materials, this is called selling on FOR basis if the supplier takes care of the entire process of transportation. And it is called selling on EX basis if the buyer takes care of the entire loading and supplier does not do the loading and transportation. The final problem that SMEs were facing was the favorable credit terms and price. See, SMEs don't go to banks because obviously the hassle of documentation and collateral is crazy. In fact, 1/3 of them are not even eligible for formal credit. So they are dependent on what interest rates their distributors or traders charge them for their credit cycles. And at these times, most of them don't even have high negotiating power. But by using OfBusiness, SMEs not only get almost the same market rate or cheaper rates for almost 500 plus raw materials like textile, chemical, agri products, but also get unsecured credit at better or similar rates offered by traders or suppliers.
That if you want 30 days credit, OfBusiness can give it to you as long as you are credit worthy. If you want more than 30 days credit, we can't. You can take it from Oxizo if Oxizo is a good enough financier for you. Otherwise, it's a no.
By the way, this financing and credit service lines became so lucrative for them that they even created a separate NBFC called Oxizo to cater multiple lending solutions for these SME clients. And by the way, even this company individually has $1 billion valuation. The principle for OfBusiness is simple. Do what's already happening in the industry, but just do it a little better. That's the masterclass for B2B businesses on user depth and understanding where the value is in the entire chain. Cool. Let's come back to the second insight that OfBusiness cracked, which is nailing low NPAs. NPAs are basically non-performing assets. So while there's a technical definition of it, in simpler terms, it is basically the amount that may not get recovered after lending. So while the industry average for NPAs is 4 to 5%, OfBusiness has cracked an NPA rate of less than 1%. See, SME financing industry is huge. There are many players, and while this business of lending sounds easy at the face value, it's really not. There's always a possibility that the company might not be able to get business revenues and it doesn't pay back. Which means that if OfBusiness has helped a company financing the purchase of the raw material, there's a possibility that a company defaults on paying back and OfBusiness does not get their money. And while the company has separated Oxizo into a separate NBFC arm that does multiple lending solutions, OfBusiness still provides unsecured credit lines on their own platform. And in both their businesses, they have cracked two things really well. One is underwriting and second is collection. Let's discuss both. To simplify, underwriting is basically a full-fledged process to judge if someone is credit worthy or not. And collection is basically the process of collecting payments back from the borrowers. And OfBusiness has cracked it really well because they do not lend to companies who do not have a minimum revenue of let's say 20 crores and do not have a certain level of credit worthiness. And what's interesting is that to this very date, Ashish heads collections at OfBusiness and brings his brilliant discipline to this cumbersome process. Also, another reason apart from the great diligence is the fact that these SMEs use OfBusiness regularly, right? Just imagine that you're a hospital equipment manufacturer and despite your monthly deliveries fluctuating a little bit, you still won't be changing your supply source every month. It's very difficult. And this sole fact of being a repeat customer make these SMEs pay on time as they don't want to mess up their ties with OfBusiness because of the great service they are receiving. Now coming down to the third insight they cracked is becoming Amazon of P2B. See, Ashish has been very smart about adding verticals to the business to grab margins wherever he could. And honestly, in B2B, there are basically 4 ways you can earn money. One is you become a distributor or wholesaler of raw materials and supply them to SMEs. Second is you provide a support service like warehousing, quality checking and logistics. Third is you enter a finance where you basically lend money in the ecosystem to any party and earn interest. And fourth is manufacturing, where you manufacture a raw material like steel sheets and supply it to businesses like car companies. So once he cracked 2 areas out of these 4, which is aggregation and financing with OfBusiness and Oxizo, he went after the third area, which is manufacturing and processing. And it's pretty similar to why Amazon started manufacturing their own clothes under Amazon Basics. And the reason is simple. Higher freaking margins and higher customer stickiness. In fact, today, this vertical comprised 27% of their business revenue. And I'll tell you why it turned out to be another masterstroke by them. Because once SME get raw materials, they do another layer of process, be it polishing, sorting, cutting and shearing. And this is exactly where they started to offer this value addition service. And the next thing they went after is manufacturing, because they literally have so much data on what raw materials are in demand and what are the prices and which companies are buying these raw materials. So whenever they see a higher demand for a particular raw material and there are not enough suppliers, they enter the category by themselves. And the way they have entered processing and manufacturing is great because they have done it by acquisitions. And if you see this list, you would see many companies they have acquired over time in different sectors like steel, aluminium, farm products, textiles, etc. Now coming down to the fourth thing they have cracked beautifully is zero customer acquisition cost. See, Ashish has been super focused on profitability since the day zero. He wants to earn profits not holistically on business, but on every single transaction. A DNA that runs deep into his company. And that's why Ashish didn't want to go to the B2C route, where you spend a lot of money on performance marketing and mainstream advertising to acquire a single customer. He thought very differently and in fact created a full-fledged customer acquisition tool called Bid Assist. I'll explain this because it's super interesting. Now you already know that the target audience of OfBusiness has been SMEs, right? And these companies regularly hunt for good government contracts because these contracts are usually big and very lucrative for SMEs. In fact, in India, almost 12 to 17,000 tenders are flown by government every single day. Now let's say the government is making a new hospital, and for this they need operation theatre machines. So they would flow out tenders in the market so that all machine manufacturers can give their quote and apply. And just put yourself in the shoes of this machine manufacturer. Imagine how difficult it is to analyze different tenders and figure out your eligibility every day. Because every tender has different multiple criteria. By the way, government does have a website for this called GEM, where you can create an account and stay updated about tenders. But Bid Assist goes one step ahead and crawls all GEM tenders and makes it interesting by adding a touch of AI. Bid Assist not only tells you whether a tender is good for you or not, but also give you probabilities of whether you would get the tender or not by calculating a success rate. And since it's a freemium tool, SMEs easily register on it and give their details to stay updated about tenders. And this becomes their lead magnet that even has got them 20 lakh SMEs on platform. This is pure genius. By the way, their financing angle also really helped them in this because a lot of suppliers had a problem with their clients not paying on time. So these suppliers thought, why not share their SME leads with OfBusiness, as OfBusiness can help these SMEs by providing financing and suppliers will get money earlier on to rotate capital. And this is just pure word of mouth, an infinite loop to new clientele that got opened for them. Awesome. So these were the 4 insights that OfBusiness used to become a rare case of a $1 billion valuation company that is also profitable. That's it for today, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't miss out on checking out Crafts. The link to check them out is in the description.